Hi, it's Kaden Hadeed. Today I'm here with
Zach Brewer,
Andrew Watson,
and Emmett McLaughlin.
And for our final project, we're talking about the invention of the iPhone and how this affected American culture as a whole. And to start off, I'm going to throw it over to Emmett.
All right, so I thought I would focus more on like the day-to-day effect of iPhones. It's obviously a big development in society, and I think every big development like that changes your life so much has upsides and downsides, and it's hard to weigh whether it's a good thing or a bad thing because each of them is such a significant factor. So there's just some interesting some interesting statistics on how important iPhones are to day-to-day life. Kaden, how many times would you think your phone is touched in a day?
Probably a lot. I'd say I would touch my phone maybe like 400 times a day.
Would you say?
500, 600.
Andrew?
I don't know. I feel like I don't touch my phone that much, so like I don't know, maybe 200.
Well, according to a market researcher from Discount, the average American touches their phone 2,617 times a day, and they check their phones so much that 40% of consumers say they look at the devices within 5 minutes of waking up, according to a 2016 survey, and 50% said that they check them in the middle of the night. So people become so reliant on it that they just don't even notice how often they look at their phone.
I know for me, a lot of times it literally just becomes muscle memory, and I almost feel like naked if I'm walking around like without my phone. I can't tell you the last time I've walked around without a phone in my pocket. It just becomes like custom to me, like maybe sometimes making sure it's still there, that I haven't dropped it, and if I have like some anxiety like sets in and like I have no idea where it is, like it's become like kind of a part of me.
I think it's become almost like a crutch whenever you're uncomfortable in like a social situation or you're bored. For example, going to the bathroom. Yeah. Like it's hard to go to the bathroom without having your phone in you because you can't spend that time doing nothing and just like looking forwards.
Yeah, that's crazy. Like no one goes to the bathroom anymore without their phone. Like it's just, I don't know, it's completely changed the way we just move, and physically. That's
created a massive generational gap because that's true for us, but our parents, I imagine they were quite bored when they were going to the bathroom because they had nothing to do. And so that kind of also related to all sorts of things that they do, their attention span, their work. That said, DeGutis, a researcher, said that individuals in their 50s and 60s are more adept at motivating themselves to stay focused because they have less mind wandering. They're not constantly intaking a bunch of information, so they're able to just focus on one.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. I mean, I have trouble like really settling down and doing like large assignments without like picking on my phone and stuff like that. I know a lot of people recommend to turn off your phone and put it away, but I just find myself either like needing it for something or honestly just going through TikTok and like looking at the time. It's like 30 minutes have gone by.
But I think that there's also a positive side to that, is that since they're taking in so much information, they have some kind of understanding they have more knowledge being taken in. So if I were to time travel and go back to my parents as teenagers, I would have a lot more knowledge than them. But the question is whether if we sat down to do the same, say like essay that we both knew about, he would probably finish it much faster because I would be, not if I was just checking my phone all the time, but I would be thinking about other stuff. My mind would be all over the place because I've been wired to do that since I was a young person.
Yeah, I think it also, something for like attention span, it makes information so accessible. Like if you don't like something, you just scroll and you're on to the next. Like you never have to like sit down and like take the time to actually like absorb information. If it doesn't interest you, you just have the complete power to like just completely go to something else. And I think that also affects like major, like not even just like work, but just like social life in general.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and even yesterday I had an essay I had to do. And it was 5 paragraphs. I wrote each paragraph at a different time. Like I'd write for a little bit, and then I'd go do something else for like 20 minutes to an hour, and then I'd come back and keep writing.
I think it's because you also had an option to do something else. Like in the old times, what would you do otherwise? Read a book, run around a tree outside in the sun. Like these days, we can go play video games. We can look at our phones, scroll through TikTok. We can do all sorts of things that weren't an option back then, to an extent.
Yeah.
I also think that I read an article about a man named D.C. Cal Newport, who was a science professor at Georgetown University, and he was able to write 4 essays, get a PhD, just because he only reads print newspapers and he turns off his computer at 5 p.m. So that has to do with he has lots of time to do things besides mind-numbing things like going to social media, and he said his life is defined by a non-fragmented attention span, because our attention span is so fragmented we can't focus on one thing because, like you said, we're always looking at different things all day long.
That's honestly fascinating. I could not imagine like powering off like 5 p.m. or something like that.
Yeah,
And
bro.
before we started, Andrew was touching on how we've come to rely on phones before we go to sleep, and not only is that bad because we're being stimulated before we go to sleep, we're supposed to be relaxing, the sleep quality is a lot worse because, like Zach was saying, the blue light.
Yeah, so blue light, it stimulates like sunlight, so your brain thinks it like still has to be like awake. And also, like, I mean, if you're going through social media and you see something that just gets like a extreme emotional response, like it's really funny or it really upsets you, it's gonna be harder to fall asleep just because of like that. Your brain thinks it needs to like focus instead of like relaxing and going to sleep.
And I think in all of our lives we've encountered the relationship between anxiety and stress and sleep, and because of our use of phones, we all have far worse sleep, and that's led to more anxiety in young people, which I think Kaden knows a little bit more about.
Yeah, that's kind of for my research side. I really dove into sort of the dark side of the iPhone because, I mean, as we just like talked about, the iPhone really captured pretty much almost every aspect of our day-to-day life, and a lot of it has made it easier. You like get up, you like check your phone, like you have the weather for the entire day right at your fingertips. I mean, it's definitely, there's a lot of good that the iPhone has done to like make our lives like more convenient, but like Emmett just mentioned, there's a whole other dark and like depressing side of like this invention, and that's what I kind of got into. More like the mental health aspect and how this did, especially in like our kind of age range, from like ages starting from ages 10 to up to 25, like kind of the adolescent period. And so I want to first start off with a question. So for all, this is like just open for all of you guys, whoever wants to answer it. How many people would you say die to suicide every year?
I don't know, like 10?
10?
In the country?
10 people?
10 globally.
Globally?
Globally.
Oh, I have no idea.
Possibly more than 10.
Yeah, I thought it was country.
I don't know. Over 800,000 people
Jeez.
commit
That's a
suicide
lot.
every year, and even countless more attempt that. So that's why like this is so important to cover, because it is the 12th leading cause of death in the United States. And it's just something like so important that's just not talked about enough, and I truly think that there is a connection between this like heartbreaking statistic and these little like black box that we like carry around in our pocket like the entire day. And especially at our age, because also I was reading another article, and according to a study, 1 in 5 of young men and women will experience an episode of clinical depression before the ages of 25. That statistic did not like exist 50 years ago. Like it's a recent statistic, it's a recent study, and it just goes to show you what is happening around us that's making us like so just
Depressed.
like sad.
I would say there's no question of the effect that constantly being on your phone has on your mental health, because I've experienced it myself. Like lately when I've been going out, my phone is very old. It's actually not that old, but I just haven't taken very good care of it. So it dies immediately. So my phone will be dead, and it's gotten to the point where I just like don't rely on looking at it to like check tests anymore, or when I'm uncomfortable. And I find that's like greatly improved the quality of my life, because I feel like I'm in the moment. I don't have to like worry about looking at anyone's social media or what everyone's doing, because the only thing that I have access to is directly in front of me.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, what we all have just been talking about for the past like 10 minutes is just how much the day-to-day life has consumed us, and what this consumption like leads to is just what we just talked about, like a dependence. And according to another survey in February of 2021, like just a couple or last year, nearly half of the respondents to that survey stated that on an average they spent about 5 to 8 hours on their phone on a daily basis. like imagine how much more things you could be doing in 5 to 8 hours. That's a full school day, like when we were back in high school.
And you
stuff
don't
like
even know. It's like when you look in your settings,
Yeah.
and you see the screen time.
Yeah, and because of that screen time, there was another, and it's been clinically proven that excessive screen time has been reported to be associated with a huge range of negative mental health effects, especially with psychological problems, a low emotional stability, and a greater risk of depression or anxiety. To kind of establish a quick timeline really quick, the iPhone was first invented on June 29th, 2007, and then Instagram and like kind of the rise of social media began on October 6th in 2010, with Snapchat coming out in 2011 and TikTok in 2016. So there's kind of that period between like 2010 and 2015 where like the iPhone really became like a household item, where it really like made its name for itself and everyone had one.
Mm-hmm.
But another side of that time period, in just those 5 years between 2010 and 2015, the number of U.S. teens that reported classic symptoms of depression surged 33% in large national surveys. Teen suicide attempts increased 23%. And then, even more troubling, the number of 13 to 17-year-olds who actually did commit suicide jumped 31%. So I just want to kind of get your opinion on those troubling statistics.
I think that it has to do with the growth of anxiety that Zach spoke about earlier, and also the growth of social media. So there's definitely a relationship between iPhones and globalization, and that's definitely a positive thing. But the negative thing is that like people who are lonely and they feel so alone look at Instagram or Snapchat or whatever, and they see all sorts of people having so much fun, and they think, oh, why am I not having that fun? But really, every person only posts on Instagram like their highest moments. So really, those people are having the same problems, but you feel isolated in yourself because no one's just like a post on Instagram saying, "Oh, I'm anxious," or "I'm lonely," because that's not our culture.
Yeah, and like a lot of people, like especially like cyberbullying has become a lot more of like a thing, especially in like these past years, like with like social media and like the internet and that kind of thing that's kind of come about. Like I remember like even like in elementary school, like half the people were getting cyberbullied on Instagram, like when you're like 10.
Yeah, it's opened a whole new wave of possibilities to like inflict more pain.
Exactly, and like it kind of causes a chain reaction where like people will get cyberbullied, and then in order to kind of cope with it, they'll like take it out on other people, and it's like so easy to do on the internet because everyone is just like right there in front of you.
Yeah, you can be anonymous too, so like things you say, you're not always gonna have to like be accountable for it. And also with like cyberbullying, I mean, like before phones, let's say a kid's getting bullied at school, he can come home and doesn't have to deal with that. With cyberbullying, like I feel like constant.
It's always there.
But I feel like
especially with how much we check our phones.
Exactly. I feel like that probably makes a lot of a difference.
Yeah. You go.
I think it'd be a mistake, though, to talk about globalization without citing that as one of the huge positives of the iPhone, is that everyone can always talk to their family members overseas, and also the blend of culture that has resulted as a rise of the internet and all this technology has made everyone smarter, everyone more knowledgeable, a decrease in like sectionalism, if that's the word I'm looking for. Like people recognize other countries and they see that their culture, like in the olden days, you would read books. I don't know. I keep saying olden days. Like before the internet, you'd like read books about a foreign country, but it was so foreign to you.
Yeah.
You were like, I'm me and they're them. But when you see on your phone every day, and you can like receive content made by them, like music, writing, all that stuff, you understand more about them as a people, and you become better as a result.
Yeah, exactly. And so before we move on from how the iPhone has like captured day-to-day life in both the good and the bad side of it, I just want to address this crisis. We really have to first acknowledge that our youth mental health system is just fundamentally flawed, and mental health issues among children and adolescents, they reflect a children's individual psychological ability, so basically the context in which they were raised. And I have a fear that this is just going to get worse and worse, because I feel like we were one of the last generations in the context we were raised to play outside. I mean, my little cousin has had an iPad since he was 4 years old. And I just fear that this dependency is just going to grow and grow to the point where these alarming statistics that we've just talked about are just going to become a day-to-day like reality, and it's going to become almost numb. Like they're not going to, strike as hard as they did today, as we were talking about. I just fear that there's no end to this problem.
And you reminded me with the iPad comment, like one of my main problems with iPhones that I witness is that when I go out to dinner with my family, like my parents are very anti-iPhone, so they would like force us not to look at our screens. But you go to like a restaurant, a lot of times you see a kid just blasting like Cocoa Melon on their iPad, and you really just learn nothing about interacting with other people and enjoying the moment. Like that's a fun experience that you would have for your whole life, but you instead just look at your iPad.
Yeah, it's definitely causing social issues.
But it definitely makes it easier for the parents to have their kids, not talking and yelling and spitting and just looking at their iPad. It's almost mind numbing. They're brainwashed by their iPad.
It's like creating an addiction in them from like a young age.
Definitely.
Yeah. They're like addicted to the screens.
And we weren't addicted to screens when we were that young. It wasn't like I played Brick Breaker on my dad's
like
BlackBerry.
DS or something.
Yeah. And even that, my parents were worried about. Kids can do whatever they want on the iPad these days.
I know. There's so much accessibility. So moving on, we're gonna kind of go into the business aspect of like how iPhone affected the economy and just all the new jobs it created, and we're gonna have Zach cover some of the statistics on that.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, for jobs it created, to start off, Apple just on its own has created 2 million jobs in the U.S. So I mean, that's engineers, app developers, suppliers, and also like research development, customer support, financial services. Like there's just so much that goes on in this. And then you also get companies like Corning, which provide the glass for the iPhone or the iPad. And then there's extra 1,053,000 jobs can be attributed to Apple because of the App Store ecosystem. So that's just other developers.
What is the App Store ecosystem? I don't even know what that is.
I don't know.
It's just like what they refer to as the like network of sort of designers and developers for the ever growing like roster.
Oh, so like all the new jobs that it
apps.
created, just like kind of the whole stem of it.
Yeah, just from like, I mean, just think of like how many apps are on the App Store. I mean, that had to be.
Do you think that those jobs are being taken from another industry though?
I mean, arguably, but there's no like definitive way to say like, oh well, like because of the iPhone or because of these.
I definitely think it is. I definitely think this whole rise of what you just talked about, the Apple ecosystem and that type of job network, is easily like definitively taking away from other networks. I mean, the newspaper is like obsolete now.
True.
I mean, that's going to be gone in like 20 years. There's just so many different businesses that have.
Yeah, but the people who had jobs in newspapers will find jobs, writing online for New York Times.
Not really. Like we just talked about with the generation gap, not many people can be that adaptable to kind of like an online interface like
True,
that.
because they don't have the attention span to read that long of an article. They're just going to look at,
Yeah.
Alright, yeah, and just moving on to some other fields of how phones affect like businesses. So advantages of having just mobile phones like in the workforce, or like in the work. It can improve customer service and like increase mobility, because so workers can work remotely, or for customers like you can communicate, like you don't have to be like actually in person. So like if you have a problem you can just call. I mean like
imagine the pandemic without Zoom.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. So like mostly just it makes it easier to communicate, and that has just like a huge impact. But there are of course some disadvantages. So workflow disruption. This kind of goes off of the whole like lack of a good attention span. So but if you get like a call or a text while you're working and you think it's like really important and you take it, or if you're like in a meeting and you have to step outside and then you have to go back, you might not be like in the right mindset, and that might decrease productivity. And I mean also with phones it kind of compromises the work balance for life and work, because you can kind of consider all hours available, because I mean like I was saying, customers, if they have a problem, can call in, just like I mean your boss can call you in if like you have to do something. I mean, we kind of experienced that with, like, teachers. I mean, like, I had teachers that would post something due the next day.
Exactly.
And it's like they'd email us, or, like, you know, they just email us and be like, oh, like, I kind of forgot about this, but I want you to complete it by the end of the night. And I'm like, what? Like, imagine if you didn't see that email too, you wouldn't be able to do the assignment for the next morning.
Like bosses texting you to come in, like,
Yeah, exactly.
I know you're not signed up for today, but like we need you for an 8-hour shift, like.
Still working.
And also, I think that oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think that the Zoom thing is largely a negative thing too, because you know human interaction is something that we all need, and you don't really get that by looking at a screen. So people are always talking about how once the pandemic's fully gone, which is pretty close right now, but once it's all the way gone, well, there'll still be like Zoom jobs, like you never go and you just work remote, and that's just like a boring life, and that I imagine that has some effect on mental health too.
And like the feeling of isolation.
Definitely.
For sure.
Yeah, going back to kind of what we were just talking about with the economic footprint of the iPhone and like what it left. I also want to highlight the fact of how easy job accessibility is now. I mean, with all these like apps that are like LinkedIn and stuff like that, where you can just fill out resumes online. I mean, hell, you could like send 100 emails to a bunch of different like corporations and firms, and you're bound to get 1 or 2 responses and set up some sort of job process. I definitely think there has been more good than bad with the economic portion of the invention of the iPhone in this current age of America, because number one, like I just said, job accessibility, there's more options for jobs. Number two, it's constantly evolving. Like there's, I mean, iOS updates and stuff like that. And finally, I think it made it a lot easier to understand. Like if I didn't get something with like Wall Street, or I could like either download an app like Robinhood, or like simply go on YouTube or different portions of social media and really learn about that. So I think education has also been a really huge part of what the iPhone has done for jobs.
Yeah, and there's definitely so many new ways to like. Technically, if you're trading crypto, I'd say you're unemployed, but you could still be making a lot of money.
Yeah.
But this study here from Macro and Econ says that the internet use, the relationship between internet usage and unemployment durations from 1998 to 2009, there was a reduction of unemployment, the duration of unemployment by about 25%. So it actually
that's insane.
Definitely a
Yeah,
positive
that's a
thing
lot.
for that.
Yeah. And then going with this economic aspect of the iPhone, we also want to dive into kind of the logistics of it, more the legislative side, and that's what Andrew did a lot of research on.
Yeah, so here's kind of a fun question. Do you think that like messages and like text and that kind of thing from your phone can be used in court?
Yes.
Definitely, I've seen it happen.
I saw it happen to Johnny Depp. And I thought that was so interesting because that's basically like, so you're saying something that's a private one-on-one thing. So I was amazed that they were able to just like Amber Heard's team. I don't know if I'm going into this course, but this opponent's team was going into another person's phone and was able to read all of his texts.
Yeah, nothing's private anymore. Everything that like you send or post, like anything can be used against you in a logistic way.
Yeah, so like a couple like interesting things about that. So as far as what Apple is doing, so your text messages and like emails and that kind of thing can actually be subpoenaed by the court, and Apple will be legally required to hand over all of those records. So that's how lawyers are able to, they can basically call up Apple and be like, all right, give me every message this guy's ever sent, and they can just do that.
Yeah, it's crazy the amount of legislation that's been passed as the iPhone continued to evolve. Like that whole thing with like Mark Zuckerberg and like Facebook, I don't even like get it. But and then also with the election fraud and stuff like that, and Twitter, and just just diving into a bunch, it's just affecting everything in politics as well.
Yeah, like especially like, so a pretty political thing is lots of governments are trying to get Apple to add backdoors to iOS to essentially allow them to hack anyone's phone at any time.
They had that for a little, didn't they? When that CIA guy was going.
Yeah, they were trying to do that, but they never actually did. So far, Apple has not added anything to allow governments to hack your phone, but stuff like that could happen in the future, and that's honestly like really terrifying.
I have a question for you guys regarding kind of the privacy and legislative part of it. I'm sure you've heard, the whole Trump thing with like Twitter, like getting banned and stuff like that, and free speech. What do you think about that? How do you think like it was justified for? Because I'm pretty sure Twitter's reasoning was that he was like inciting like revolt and stuff like that. Do you like where do you draw the line between, like a technological portion of free speech? Because like back in the real olden days, like you could just like yell out like whatever, like that was free speech. But now you can just type anything on a phone and it goes to millions of people. So where do you kind of draw the line to where like laws need to get involved to where you need to ban someone on Twitter like that?
I think that these people who are going to react to things that you could call them a maniac, whatever you want to call them, things that someone like that would say, they'll find that information no matter what. So it's like there was a lot of outrage from Joe Rogan after he said like anti-vaccine stuff, like Neil Young, Joni Mitchell left Spotify. But I think that it's false information, but he's not like forcing you to believe that. He's just outputting information that you can choose whether you want to believe or not. I don't think that's in the right of big corporations or governments to decide what information can be released, because that's just too much power in their hands.
Yeah, but then again, is Twitter like a private entity corporation? Like, are they allowed to like filter what is able to like be said on their app?
Technically,
it's just I feel it's all like really gray and like blurred lines when it comes to I don't know this whole technological
really
revolution.
Messy.
Yeah,
like especially because like we can all understand that like probably like the main form of communication with like large groups of people these days is like Twitter, right? Like it's pretty significant and like arguably more significant than like old like news like TV kind of thing, because like I hear about more stuff like on the internet and on Twitter and that kind of thing like long before I would see it on the news,
because literally everyone has a voice, and because everyone's always looking at people with voices, they think that they should say their voice, so everyone is voicing their opinions online, which it's within their rights. The question of whether they should is a different question.
Yeah, so like kind of the question of like, well, Twitter is technically a private enterprise, but should things that are said on Twitter be protected under free speech? I'd say it's pretty arguable that they should, like that everyone has a right to say whatever they want to say, and they really shouldn't ban for that reason, but also at the same time like understanding that not all speech is protected. Like you can't say fire in a movie theater, like you can't like make threats or do that kind of thing without like proper cause or whatever. So
I think
there's kind of like a gray area, like should we allow terrorists to coordinate terror attacks using WhatsApp? Like is like I would argue obviously not, but also at the same time like it's definitely a very messy topic.
It's hard to tell, and the reason why it's so problematic is that like the whole rules of the privacy is so vague. Like everyone's like, is Alexa listening to me? And Alexa's like, no, we're not. But everyone still thinks they are, because we don't trust big corporations. Because like you look up stuff on the internet about like Old Spice, and then all of a sudden every single ad you have is for Old Spice. There's definitely like some kind of stuff going on behind the scenes that we don't fully understand.
Yeah, and kind of moving on, but also like continuing with this political theme, I also want to talk about how iPhones and social media completely changed the way like politics run and campaign. I mean, like governors have like TikTok accounts now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just. I mean, it's just.
I would not want to see that TikTok account.
I mean, it's just crazy, like how much of like an outreach they can have. I mean, what we talked about, and honestly, this class a lot, was how the most votes in presidential history was Joe Biden, and the second one was Donald Trump, both in the same election, the biggest election turnout, and I'm pretty sure that was solely because of social media. I mean, I remember during that time, I couldn't scroll like twice on my phone without seeing some sort of voting projection or like speech or just like
and that's
anything.
That also becomes a problem in that because there's so much politics being shoved down your throat at all times. That's what like this polarization that's plagued our country kind of since Donald Trump and Hillary, but also before that. It's because everyone is always thinking about politics. Everyone's always voicing their opinions, and everyone's able to see the other side and be like, "Oh, that's bad."
It also creates like echo chambers. So like, you know how you talked about like if you watch something about like Old Spice, you're gonna get like Old Spice ads. Like it'll also, if you're watching a YouTube video and it's like more of a, like takes more of a right perspective or more of a left perspective, it's gonna keep giving you like stuff you like.
Yeah, creating a targeted demographic.
Yeah, you just keep getting like what you want to believe and like what you want to hear,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel like that also creates a lot of the polarities, and like people just like they think they're right and that there's like the other side, the other argument is like completely void of any facts or anything.
Yeah, that's the whole reason there's like a whole flat earther movement.
Yeah. So going around the room, would you say that like this iPhone and technological revolution is more polarizing or more connecting?
Oh, definitely polarizing.
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 Yeah, for
For for politics,
I'm talking-
polarizing.
Political.
Well, I don't think those are mutually exclusive. Like, we are connected to the people we're polarized with. But I guess you mean unifying.
That's
yeah.
true.
Um,
It almost like unifies us into groups.
yeah,
like,
yeah, it's
We're
it's
we're
a hard
connected to
question.
like-minded people and then polarized with
Yeah,
against
From
non-like-minded people.
But overall, like, there used to be, like, or I don't know, but the history books say the whole country loved FDR because he was, like, helping the poor people. Obviously not the whole country, but they said most of the country. Like, no one really loved, there's not one beloved person in this country. He used to be Will Smith, but now we hate him. Like, there's just there's so much content that no one can, like, be that guy.
Yeah, and like kind of going off that, like, so back when TV was first invented, they said that John F. Kennedy was the first like TV president, right? Because he looked really good, and he acted really good. Well, they say that Barack Obama is the first social media president. So he actually used over 15 social media sites to like do ads for his political campaign, do fundraisers, spread awareness. Like, he was plastered all over social media. And part of the reason that he won the 2008 election is definitely attributed to the like sharp rise of social media and that kind of thing, because the iPhone had just been released, like people were getting them, they were on the internet a lot more, and so Obama used social media and internet sites and those kinds of things in order to push his campaign forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in your research, Andrew, were there any laws that like you were coming across that like kind of like jumped out to you where you thought was like really abnormal, like stemming from the invention of the iPhone?
So, besides the subpoenaed things, I did see that there was a class action lawsuit against Apple in Portugal and several other countries in the world because they said that they were using planned obsolescence, which basically means that they were designing iPhones in order to break down and become obsolete, to force people to buy the new ones, like, over time. And so people were suing them, saying that that's not right, they should be built to last like normal. And actually from that, I learned that iPhones actually stop receiving software updates after 5 to 7 years. So even if your iPhone is still in good condition, it will eventually stop receiving software updates, so you can't use apps or that kind of thing.
Well, for those of you that don't know at home, Andrew has actually only had one phone his entire life.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
As someone that's, you know, has an old iPhone, do you notice a difference in like slowing like technological interface?
So they kind of said that the generation of phone I have was like the very start of that, the iPhone 6S. And actually I did get a message recently that my phone is going to stop receiving software updates soon.
Wow.
So, yeah, I won't be able to get like updated apps and that kind of thing soon. So I'll probably have to get a new one, which is kind of disheartening because it's like, I don't want to spend $1,000 on a new phone every year. Like,
It is really
it's so much. And kind of going off that, so a lot of you have probably noticed that like over time your iPhone batteries like start draining super fast, right? And one of the things was that they're actually kind of built to do that, to try and get you to replace the battery.
I think that
Yeah, go ahead.
a reason why we don't trust corporations is largely because of that, because they just don't care about us. They see us as money, like they make money off of us. For example, in 2017 there was the Batterygate suit, which is basically what you're talking about. Like people started suing because they were buying like $1,000 phone, and it would die immediately, and Apple was playing that on purpose. It's like the difference between an old car and a new car. New cars are designed to die after 8 years, and my dad's still driving his dad's like Buick Skylark from 1965. But then, and so Apple said, we have never and would never do anything to intentionally shorten the life of any Apple product or degrade the user experience to drive customer upgrades. And then 2 years later, they paid $500 million because that's exactly what they were doing.
Yeah. And even kind of going off that, so a kind of major thing in the tech industry right now is the right to repair. So basically what that's about is it kind of started with car engines, where the manufacturers of car engines weren't selling parts or schematics to individual people. So for example, like if you had an Audi and you had a problem with your Audi, you would have to go back to the Audi dealership to get parts and that kind of thing and have them repair it, so then that way they would get more money. And so basically this movement is to force companies to release their schematics and like sell parts to individual consumers, so then that way we're able to repair things on our own. And actually I found an article talking about Apple is actually going on with that with the iPhone 12 and iPhone 13. They announced self-service repair, which is they're selling manuals and tools in order to allow consumers to be able to repair their phones themselves. So when your battery that allegedly was built to degrade rapidly over time starts dying, you'll actually be able to get tools and parts to repair the phone yourself. Instead of having to pay like another $200 at an Apple store, you can pay like $50 to get the tools and do it yourself. So that's actually kind of a big win for the right to repair. But it's definitely a battle that's kind of being fought in the legislation, and also just like kind of as a social thing, like consumers pressuring companies to do these sorts of things. Yeah, so any thoughts about that? Like, what do you guys think about repairing your phone yourself?
I mean, how hard can it be? You're basically, I've seen the guy at Staples do it. He takes it off the screen, puts it on, just like snaps it on, and then he charges me $100. It takes 5 minutes, and I'm paying him $100. So how hard could it be if it's only 5 minutes?
Just a random thing I just like really thought of when you were saying that, kind of going off of Zach's more business side of it. Just random kiosks in the mall. I don't know. I can just sit here for an hour and just think of random jobs that have sparked because of the iPhone. So just kind of take a detour and just like how much it did affect that economical footprint.
Yeah, it's like an entirely new industry, and there's like cellular, there's dual, all these like Optimum, Verizon, Cricket, all this stuff that you see ads for all the time. These guys have many employees.
Yeah, it's also permanently
jobs.
affected the currency flow. I mean, I pull out my phone, I'm like, hey, I'll Venmo you $10 if you A or B, and then or there's
it's
like
made
Apple
life
Pay,
it's made life
Cash
easier.
App.
Like I Venmo so often now, I wonder how I even survived before.
Like with cash. Going off of that, another random question: do you think cash is going to end up being obsolete, like paper money? Do you think that's ever going to be like where people are going to be Venmoing, Cash Apping, Apple Pay more than pulling out a wallet and giving them a $5 bill for your soda at the
I
gas
already
station?
do that because it's inconvenient for me to walk to like
Exactly.
Sadler and go to the ATM and get cash when I always have a card in my wallet and a pocket.
But you still don't think cash? You think cash will always like be a driving force and like
For the next
foreseeable future?
20, 30 years, yeah, because that's how it's always been, and that's how we prevent inflation.
Yeah.
I think cash will still be around for like a very, very long time. I mean, very far into the future, I think maybe it could become sort of obsolete, but
Yeah, I think like electronic payments, like everyone has a phone on them nowadays, right? So like it's definitely a lot more convenient to use your iPhone to like scan like Apple Pay at the Wawa for your coffee or whatever you're buying there. Like, it's definitely a lot more convenient, but I feel like most like people who are older than us, like in their 30s these days, probably don't trust like online payments as much, like things like crypto and Apple Pay and like PayPal and Venmo and that kind of thing. So I think cash will kind of always have a place, but I definitely think it'll get phased out even more, like, since credit cards and debit cards have existed.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. So basically, with everything that we've been talking about, from the iPhone's day-to-day life operations to its business ventures and its economic footprint, all the way to like the legislative and effect it had on our politics and that sort of campaigning, and then with the mental health aspects and how it affects the adolescents, emotional value. Do you guys think that overall the iPhone has had a positive or negative effect on like our society as a whole, like everyone here in this room?
There's definitely a lot of positive, but it's hard to weigh the two. I would say it's such hard. I can't even answer that question because it's so different. I would say it's also I've never experienced life without the iPhone.
Yeah,
so
no, it's really hard to.
Alright, I would think overall I would say positive. I mean, I think a lot of it depends on like how we use it. So like I think you said like what average American spends like 5 to 8 hours on their phone or something like that. Like that's too much time. Like I feel like we need to like kind of lower that. And I mean also with like social media, and that you talked about how like people will see like social media, oh like these people having like such a good time, and then you're like, oh well, I feel like you start to feel bad about yourself because like, oh, I don't do that. I think as if we like kind of understand like how like that's not how it always is for like said person, and also with like I was talking about how people kind of get united in these like-minded groups if we start to kind of realize that the things we're seeing online are geared towards us, so that we can start to understand like maybe this isn't exactly how it is. So I think that if we start to sort of adapt the way we use iPhones,
but
it can get even better.
Will that ever happen, do you think?
Probably not. Probably
Yeah.
not.
If anything, it's probably going to keep getting worse.
Yeah.
I say right now, overall, with everything we've been talking about, just bouncing back and forth, discoursing, I think the iPhone has definitely had a substantial positive effect on our like generation as a whole.
Yeah.
But I can definitely see the path that we're going down now, because with every year, these numbers that we're talking about are just getting worse and worse. I can definitely see in maybe 20 to 30 years' time that we look back to like 2007 when the iPhone was first invented, or 2010 when Instagram was released. I can definitely say that, damn, I wish that never happened, because
Same.
it definitely seems like the consumption of our lives is just going to get more and more substantial from here.
I always say that, but there's things that I would miss. Like I always say, I'm gonna get rid of my iPhone and get a flip phone, but there's things that I would miss too much about having an iPhone, like having Spotify all the time, because I love listening to music. I listen to music all the time, and I can listen like any song from anywhere in the country, or like having a camera in my pocket all the time, so I can like remember memories. So it's something that I don't really look at positively, but I have a hard time living without. So that's basically my answer.
What about you, Andrew? How do
Yeah.
you feel about this?
I definitely think there's like a net positive just because of like the connectedness, right? Like I'm able to stay in contact with like all my friends from high school, even though we're like hundreds of miles apart. Like I can meet people on the internet from like other countries and like see their culture like secondhand.
Yeah,
Like,
with all the polarity, there definitely is unity.
yeah, like you said earlier, like about people like seeing other groups from like different places and like sort of understanding their culture, and that like everyone at the end of the day we're all human just like trying to live our lives. Like it's definitely like kind of humbling to like be able to see that every day, like with your phone. Like yeah, but again, like going down into the future, I could definitely see the numbers getting really bad. So
Yeah, a lot of my research was, more on the depression and the dark side of the iPhone. But I will say, when I was conducting my research, I did see, like for example, my first Google search was like suicide rates like since 2010, and the first thing that came up was like the National Helpline. And so,
Yeah.
I mean, I will say that with the increased like depression, anxiety, those levels, I will say that there has been a lot more outreach for an you know the opposite side of it, like the outlet. I can't really get the words together right now.
Like people who need help. Like,
Yeah, there
it's a lot
is.
easier to get
It
help.
is a lot easier to get help. Whether or not you do get help, that's a whole other different conversation for like another time. But I would say overall, has had a positive impact on our American culture as a whole.
All right. So in conclusion, I think we've all learned more and more about the iPhone. Hopefully, we've taught the listeners some. And
Thank you.
see you on the next podcast.